So this is a development log for myself personally, for my game that actually doesn't really have a name right now. It was originally called Perfection, but of course, that's not a good name. So as it is right now, the project that I'm working on currently does not actually have a name for it. But I've put 300 hours into it currently. This current project started as a game jam project for the Buswick 2016, I believe. During that time it was a month-long game jam, and I was working 2 jobs, so I only realistically had like less than a few weeks to work on it. So the game was received really well. A lot of people really enjoyed it. They thought they liked the action and just the melee aspect of it. Let me just show you a quick demonstration of what the game actually is before I even go about like explaining anything more. So the game in its barest form is a top-down shooter, and you just clear out rooms full of enemies, and that is in its most basic form all it is. So you can of course move around. You have a reload function as well. Oh wow, this one you actually can reload when you're so this is the original game jam version. It actually is really slick. I'm not being conceited saying that. I'm just kind of surprised how smooth it's running right now. So I think it's pretty self-explanatory. You can shoot enemies as you go through every level. You can melee them just like that. It doesn't matter what direction they're facing when you melee them. Enemies can spot you, and they can also navigate through levels. Let me go ahead and demonstrate that. So you see how this guy, he can navigate to me when I shoot my gun, so I'm making noise right now. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. I think a lot of people can kind of get the gist, and of course you can cloak as well. Whoop! There you go. And that's essentially all the game is. It's an action shooter, and you can stealth around enemies, do that. So yeah, the game jam was called Project P, and I worked on it for the month of August, I believe, and then I kind of was working on Frog Hop, and Frog Hop was like pretty much done. It was just undergoing a lot of beta testing and just fixes. That was a very harrowing time since I was working 2 jobs, but that game was completed eventually and was released on February 23rd, 2017. After Frog Hop was released, there were some fixes that were done for it. Not many, since the game wasn't really exploding in popularity. So during that time, I was actually working on 2 other games. Drone Strike, which was a game jam entry for the 1 game a month jam. And then I have Kangaroo Escape, which was more of a personal solo project. It was more of a challenge for myself to see if I could develop games quickly and efficiently. And I think I was able to do it just fine. And then I also ended up making Fidget Spinner Simulator with a guy named Clayton Belker. He's the host of the Buswick, and he has an amazing voice talent. So you should definitely check it out, mainly just for the voice acting, because it's amazing. But other than that, this game kind of went under hiatus for a while, and then I decided to pick it up. And during that time, I would say the first 100 hours were probably spent on just making the game feasible because I was thinking of making it a bigger game. And so during the first 100 hours of development, a lot of time was spent making the engine, the AI code, flexible, so I could change them easily, change their values easily. Take for example, I can actually go into a variable for any enemy. So this is like the most basic enemy in the game, and I can change things like how long they get stunned, the range at which they can shoot enemies. It's pretty self-explanatory, but I had to set up this entire system so that it was easy to make it so enemies can have different unique behaviors without refactoring code constantly. So refactoring is where let's say you already have this system that you made, But then refactoring is basically, you basically scrap that and you rebuild it again so it's more flexible, or just does things in a much more graceful way, or a less cumbersome way. So the code just is a lot smoother. So that, I'd say the first 100 hours were just refactoring code and just making sure a lot of the systems worked. One of the biggest features that went into the game was probably the whole dialogue system. So I can actually demonstrate that when I'm showcasing how a room is built. That way I can kind of run through how that's done. But the dialogue system, that took a while to get together, but it worked out in the end, and it's really was is going to be a key component of what makes this game be capable of telling a story. And so I think, well, you'll see more of that as I demonstrate that later. But a lot of time was just spent making the systems work and just not actually making content really. I'd say like the later quarter of it was, some of the time was put on making some of the levels and such. So around the 100 to 200 hour mark, a lot of the time was then spent on just grinding at level making and also assets. So things like new weapons, new enemies, better, just updating the sprite work and just making the game just like have more stuff. So that was quite an interesting time, and a lot of good progress was made. There was also a lot of fixes. I'd say like a quarter of my time is just spent on fixing stuff. So I've been trying to figure out an approach to developing things in a way that I'm not being too much of a, ironically, perfectionist, and trying to make sure that things function just well enough that I don't waste too much time making it perfect, and then people say they don't like it or they want to change it, which is, pretty terrible. So I'm forcing myself to change the way I approach development in such a way that I'm focusing more on actual content, actual playable levels in the game. Before, when I was making Frog Hop, one of the biggest mistakes I ever made was, I think I actually have a room. Well, I don't. It's basically a lot of time is spent there to make sure that that new asset works well and it behaves as it should. But one of the biggest problems I had was I would spend so much time making new assets that I wasn't properly planning actual level like design. And so what I mean by that is, instead of let's make level 1, okay, it's kind of missing something, let's make something new for it, versus let's make something new and then put it in a level, was one of the biggest problems I made. So I found that, especially with this game and even Drone Strike and Kangaroo Escape, these games, I've been approaching them in such a way that I am not wasting time making an asset that might go into the game. It's more so, let's just make the room and then add a new asset if something feels a little like something's missing. And so far it's worked pretty well. I'm not really sure how well that works in a bigger team dynamic where it's generally better to plan everything. Although honestly, I've found it's extremely hard to plan something as like game development, and just like a lot of little things have changed as I've developed this game. Things like an enemy's design. For example, I'll showcase this guy. This is one of the enemies you'll encounter earlier on. It's a guy with like an SMG, but he was going to have like a laser sight, and he would be able to lock you down. I can kind of explain it a little bit more in detail, but because of the nature of how unpredictable game development is, that's the reason why I focus on, we finished level 1, let's make level 2, and let's just see how that works. If I need something new, we'll develop that and put it in. And just that's kind of how I've approached it. And so far it's worked really well. As it is right now, the 200 to 300 hour mark, a lot of time was spent on just rooms. Again, I prioritizing actual level development versus art, a lot of like background assets. Music is coming along. A lot of it's still more roughed out, and it's not really, the music sounds pretty good. It's just, I I find it's awkward because when you're making music, at least for me, I find music making to be a lot more enjoyable than actual development. Sound assets, sometimes I make sound assets, not all the time, but sometimes I do if I really need to like make sure something feels right, like a new weapon or a new like function or like a menu system, and you need to have just the right sound to it. Those are things that honestly like I'm okay with coming in later, although it would be nice to like, let's just make a bunch of background assets like couches and trees and tables, beds. But as it is right now, it's not really the goal. Less time spent on new weapons, mainly because I've kind of have a pretty good idea of how I'm going to develop, how I'm going to like introduce new weapons. I do feel kind of bad because I think I should have explained the gist of this game more. So now that I've kind of have a more of a fleshed out story. So essentially, you're playing as this guy, and he's a felon who's been captured by the police, and you have to basically do their bidding in order to be set free instead of being thrown into jail. And so you're sent into a hotel that's been taken over by a terrorist group, and you're hunting down the main leader of it. So that's the gist. And you have two different weapon categories. You have lethal and non-lethal. Lethal kills, and non-lethal sedates, knocks out. And so depending on which way you go with that, the public and other people will have varying opinions about you, no matter which way you go with that. That was like the heavily abridged version, as long as that talk was. That was the heavily abridged version of what is going on right now with the game and what happened in the last 300 hours put into the game. As for why I'm starting to do a video at the 300 mark, I'm not really sure, but I do feel like it's necessary for my own sanity, just so I can kind of see what the bigger picture is. I can kind of explain some minor additions. So the game, as it looks right now, it's very similar to Project P's UI and such. But some of the things like the cursor, for example, you'll see like a little number tick down. So now it's 5, 4. That's been adjusted. You'll notice that the UI also now has like a warning that appears that you're low on ammo. That's a new thing. No ammo. And then spacebar also reloads now. I've changed it so the use, interact, and the reload buttons are both the R key. This is all by default, so you can rebind them. And the space button. And I found that space actually works really well for reload. And a lot of other people have said that they really like how you can press space instead of R, because you don't have to lift your index finger from the D key to R to press to reload. So it's actually kind of nice. You feel like you're still in control of your movement, but you can reload at the same time. Shift is still cloak. The cloak still functions pretty much identical to how it has. One of the other changes is the characters now rotate in 8 directions instead of 4. It was pretty janky in the Game Jam version, but I think this change really smooths it out more, so it just looks much nicer. Because before it was he just like snapped, and it was a little janky, and it looked awkward when he would shoot diagonally. But now that they actually rotate, it's a lot nicer. It's also more work, which is very annoying, but I think in the end it paid off. That was another reason why the game got refactored, is because I had to change up a lot of how the code was done so it could properly handle 8 directions. I think, that guy's wandering. You'll notice, it's very hard to notice, but the cursor actually kind of like does little like quirks, like it kind of shrinks when you shoot or when you melee, just to show a bit of feedback, which is always good. Also, one of the biggest changes that the game went through was during, I'd say around the 280 hour mark, this game was converted over to Game Maker 2. And so far, Yo-Yo Games did a good job making it really easy to convert it. And so it was a little awkward at first, and there's some new systems that Game Maker 2 uses, but all in all, it seems to work pretty well. So when I said the AI got updated so it can incorporate more behaviors, one of the things that got changed was incorporating things like enemies being able to wander around. So for example, when you alert an enemy, this is totally exploiting the system, but So he'll chase after you for a while, and now he's wandering. So little things like that have been changed as well. I can also showcase that. So this guy is looking at this guy. If I kill this guy and he sees him die, he'll chase after me, like where I'm standing. And I made that change mainly because it was kind of dumb how enemies would just like literally see someone die in front of them and they wouldn't do anything. So that's another thing that got changed. So did it work? Nope. It's glitched. Work in progress. Hold on a second. I want to... Oh, there you go. Okay. This guy will actually move and shoot. He's kind of hovering right now, but... Yeah, there you go. So he's moving and shooting right now. Because I've heard a lot of comments from people saying, like, it would be cool if they moved and shoot, and they do move and shoot, so... That's things. You'll notice that bullet shells are popping out now from when you shoot a gun. A lot of UI things like that, where the game just froze for a second just to like emphasize a kill. Let's see. I don't have the sprite for it, but the tranquilizer pistol is one of the other non-lethal weapons that you can use. It's silent compared to other weapons. So for example, if I shoot at this guy, he won't hear him. That's the kind of thing I'm trying to go for with the lethal and non-lethal weaponry, is making the weapons drastically different, but also kind of follow very similar rules. For example, lethal weaponry generally is noisy, a little bit more aggressive, and just more for like if you're just trying to get in on the action. Whereas I would say non-lethal is more about a cautious playstyle where you're trying to generally stealth. You can play it aggressively too. It's not like you're restricted. Like you can play lethal stealthily. Some lethal weapons are quiet and some are loud. Most are loud. Enemies do not wake up from non-lethal weaponry, and I did that because it just seemed like it would get really frustrating if enemies just constantly kept waking up when you're like on the other side of a room, and it'd just be so stupid. The weapon code and all that got refactored as well, and now it functions quite well. I'll even be open to showcasing another weapon. Let me, oh yeah, cell phone. That's another thing that a lot of time is spent on this. So you'll have a cell phone, you'll be able to switch weapons, call people, you'll have an options menu. Yeah. Most of it doesn't work, obviously, but yeah. So I can kind of showcase how a room is built. So let's I can go ahead and show the dialogue system while we're also here. So case, I can't use words, so let's just do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. Good old dang game development. All right, so actually we can have one of our characters talk, and then we'll have, let's do 3 lines of dialogue. SCR pick, I believe. Yes. Okay. T pick. We will not have a picture. 3 of those. All right. Now let's just copy this. Okay. Copy, and then we need a break function, or else it'll mess up. Let's see. Text. Hello. My name is Bob. Hashtag. Okay. And there. Okay. And so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then we'll do demonstrating how cool this dialogue system is, even though it's quite quiet, quite simple. So let's see, text ID. Gotta go into our object. Text ID equals 6. Sorry, I sound so like I'm droning. It's just because like when you do this for a while, it's kind of like, all right. So like take this object, I give it this code. It's like I'm trying to not sound dull, but that's what it takes. You can see there's no hitbox, but one of the features, kind of like Paper Mario, is the exclamation that appears when you can interact with something. So if I press spacebar, oh god, I can't even see what it says right there. This is a terrible demonstration. Welcome to game dev. This is the part that is not glamorous at all. But that's how experiences are made. That's what it takes. Okay. Hello, my name is Bob. Hashtag, just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, demonstrating how cool this dialogue system is, even though is quite simple. So that's probably one of the biggest features that was added when I was refactoring the game, and it in the end has paid off. It was very annoying coding the systems in and changing it just because I wanted to make content, as I've said, but we're past that. And yeah, it's pretty cool. And the game pauses when you are in this sort of mode. So if someone's shooting at you, which I've deliberately designed most rooms so that when you're busy interacting with stuff, you're not fighting anyone. That's generally the rule that I follow. I might break it, but I generally would prefer not to, because can you imagine being in a really intense firefight and there's like, gosh, and you're trying to run away, or like you're trying to press the reload button, which is the same button as interact, and then you talk to something, you're like, no, I don't want this. So there's things like that that I have to work with in order to make sure the game is not frustrating. So Marta, I'm showcasing a character, Marta, who's the chief of the police, and she gives you a second chance to redeem yourself and not be thrown in jail, because being in jail sucks. I can kind of show the other weapons. So this is the throwing knife. It's lethal, obviously. It's silent, and you throw a knife. The sound effect is placeholder, obviously. Whenever you right-click or perform a melee button, which your melee button is right-click, if you right-click near a knife, you'll see they're flashing. You'll do a spin attack. And so it's kind of a mix of a stealthy but also ambush style of play. So because it's more, I mean, it's both melee and ranged. So if you can of course stick an enemy, and then I can do that. So you can see how you can also set it up so you can throw it at a wall on the other side of a room, and then you could try to like ambush a bunch of enemies like that, which is pretty cool. I really like how this weapon turned out. It might be one of my favorites, but yeah, it's a very ambush stealthy playstyle. So it's perfect for those players who want lethal, but they want to go stealthy, or they want something that's a little bit more melee heavy or a little bit more aggressive. That's definitely for you. Originally, it only had 2 throwing knives, so I buffed it to 4, and I think that's better. In the end, it's all about the spin attack, and it's pretty fun. Let's see. I'll showcase the taser. This weapon, currently, it basically, there's 2 functions to it. When you press primary fire, you do a little deflect ability. It doesn't stun, it just deflects bullets. And when the bullet is deflected, it's non-lethal. So, but the only downside is, despite it being infinite ammo, you can spam it as much as you want. It's just there's a long cooldown to it, and it's, again, you have to really time your deflect well. I don't know how people will receive it, but that's currently what it is. The melee button by itself doesn't do anything, but you'll see these little batteries, and every time you melee an enemy, it'll chain a melee attack to another enemy. So this is pretty self-explanatory. Yeah. So that's why it's also kind of similar to the knife, how it's ambush heavy, but it's also kind of evasive in a way. So, for example, oh, I crashed the game. That's what I get. I couldn't showcase the deflect because my game crashed. Oh well, that's game dev. I'm a little bit annoyed that I can't figure out a good name for this game. And that's part of the reason why I've been holding back on promoting it or showing any footage, simply because I don't have a name. But that's not a very good reason, honestly. I think just for me personally, I just don't feel comfortable showing something when I feel like my motivation is often driven by just keeping things to myself, even though that's not healthy. But as it is, I'm still chipping away at this. I'm still busy with my full-time job, and it's coming along. It is. It's slow, but it is making progress, and I'm really trying to make sure that whenever I spend time working on it, I'm not wasting time on overly fixing something, adding things that are just not going to go in. Also, I have no arms because literally when you switch weapons, you'll see the character hold a weapon differently. Just because there's things like that are missing, but again, that's not the priority generally. But yeah, feel shy. Oh, darn. He wasn't, hold on, let me see if I can get, like, him bunched up with, like, the other guy. Okay, that's perfect. There you go. Yeah, so you can see how the melee can kind of chain to other enemies. So if you get, like, in a way, in theory, because there's 5 batteries in the current version, if there's 10 really weak enemies and they're all bunched up, you could just annihilate all of them with the lightning. But I'm not sure how people will receive that. Again, originally, the deflect used a battery, but I currently have it so it doesn't because it seemed kind of frustrating. But yeah, those are some of the weapons. The shotgun is in the game. It was in Project P, and it, of course will be in this game because a shotgun's too much fun. Close range, hit scan. Pretty self-explanatory. I'll even show one more gun. It's the air gun. It's similar to the shotgun. Only difference is it stuns enemies. Also, when an enemy is stunned, they take more melee damage. So yeah, I think that does it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope that when I look at this video, I'll at least have some reassurance that progress has been made. Obviously, I don't have an actual normal room to show because I'd rather keep that secret. In terms of a demo, I think it's mostly just going to be kind of like private in terms of showing it to other people. But so far, what's driven me to be able to work on this, despite being a very codependent way of putting it, people seem to say it's really fun. And so it seemed like a valid approach to working on this game. So, all right, well, while these guys are snoozing away, I think that about does it for this video. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and suicide. Ba 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 da ba da ba da 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 da